Welcome to the deep dive. Today we're tackling a really fundamental concept in Python, the none keyword. You might also hear it called none type.
That's right.
You shared some great material covering variables, data types, sequences.
Right.
And, well, understanding none is just key, isn't it, for writing robust code?
Absolutely. It helps handle missing information gracefully,
Yeah.
avoids those, tricky bugs.
Exactly. So our mission today is to really unpack what none means, how it's different from things like false, that's a big one, and where people are likely to bump into it.
Yeah, but also linking it back, to variables, Booleans, the stuff we've touched on before.
Seeing the connections.
It's all about building that solid foundation.
So why should our listeners care? Well, getting none right it's crucial for solid, bug-free Python. It helps you manage when maybe a variable doesn't have a value yet or a function doesn't return anything specific. And spotting the difference, the subtle difference sometimes between none and false, that can save you some real programming headaches.
Definitely.
Okay, let's dive in then. What exactly is none in the Python world?
So at its heart, none just represents the absence of a value. Think of it like null in other languages, maybe.
Right.
It means there's no actual data there.
Okay, absence of value, like an empty container?
Sort of, yeah. But Python's none has its own quirks, like it's a singleton.
A singleton, what does that mean in practice?
It means Python only ever creates one instance of the none object. No matter how many times you type none in your code, it's always referring back to that exact same single object in memory.
Oh, interesting. So just one actual none.
Exactly. It's an efficiency thing and also important for how identity checks work, which we'll get to.
Right. That unique nature really makes it distinct. And you mentioned this leads into comparing it with false, which often causes confusion.
Yes, that's a critical point the video makes. Conceptually, none is just not the same thing as false.
Why is that distinction hammered home so much?
Because they can act similarly sometimes, which trips people up. But they're fundamentally different objects, different concepts.
How does the video demonstrate that?
Well, it shows what happens when you use the function. If you do bool none, the result you get back is false.
Okay. So that's why people call it falsy, because in a Boolean check, it acts like false.
Precisely. It evaluates to false in those contexts, like in an if statement.
And this seems like the important but. Does that mean none is false?
No, exactly. That's where the identity operator comes in. The video shows that if you compare none to false using a so, none is false, the result is actually false.
Okay, so bool none is false, but none is false is also false. Why is Boolean?
Because is checks if two variables point to the exact same object in memory.
Yeah.
And since there's only one none object and false is a different Boolean object, none is false has to be false. They're different things.
Got it. They occupy different spots in the computer's memory.
Exactly. And even if you check for equality of value, that also gives you false. They don't have the same value, fundamentally.
Wow. So what's the practical advice then? If I have a variable, say a result, and I want to know if it's specifically none.
The strong recommendation, highlighted in the source, is to always use is or is not. So the main reason is clarity and avoiding potential, albeit sometimes obscure, edge cases with objects that might try to overload the operator in weird ways. Using is direct, faster, and explicitly checks for the none-singleton object itself.
Right. And the video mentioned this as a common pitfall.
Yes, especially for beginners. It's easy to think works for everything, but for checking none is the standard, safer way. Avoids confusion with other falsy things like zero or empty strings, too.
That's a super valuable tip, is none. Got it. Okay, so we know what none is and what it isn't, especially compared to false. Let's talk practical uses. Where does none actually show up in code? The video gave some examples.
Yeah, a couple of really common ones. First is as a default value for optional function parameters.
Okay.
The video used the sort method, or rather the sorted function, looking at its help text. It has that optional key parameter.
Right. I remember seeing key something.
Well, if you look at the documentation shown, it actually says key none. That's its default.
So what does key none mean for sorting?
It means if you don't provide your own key function when you call sorted, Python just uses the natural comparison order for the items in the list. Like numbers sort numerically, strings sort alphabetically. None signals use the default mechanism.
So it's like a placeholder for no specific instruction given.
Exactly. It allows the function to be flexible. If you give it a key, it uses it. The video also noted the reverse parameter defaults to false, another default, just a Boolean one this time.
Makes sense. Flexible function design. What was the other main use case?
The other big one is as the implicit return value from functions.
Implicit return value.
Yeah, if you write a Python function and it gets to the end without hitting an explicit return statement that gives back a value.
Like it just finishes its tasks.
Right. Or maybe it has return but nothing after it. In those cases, Python automatically makes the function return none.
Oh, okay. So if a function doesn't explicitly say return this specific thing, it silently returns none.
Exactly. It signifies that the function completed, but didn't produce a specific result value to send back.
Like the print function we talked about before, it does something, shows stuff on screen, but doesn't really give you a value back.
Precisely. If you were to do x print hello, the value of x would be none. Because print performs an action, it doesn't calculate and return a result.
That clicks. Okay, thinking back to the earlier stuff on variables and types, how does none fit in there? Can I just assign none to a variable?
Absolutely. Just like you'd say my number 10 or misstring hello, you can totally write my variable none.
And what would that mean?
It's often used to initialize a variable before it gets a real value, or to signify that maybe some data isn't available yet, or even to clear out a previous value. It explicitly marks the variable as holding nothing meaningful right now.
So, like user preference, none before the user has set anything.
Perfect example. And remember when we discussed data types, strings, integers, floats, lists, tuples?
Yeah.
None isn't any of those. It actually belongs to its own unique data type in Python called none type.
Ah, okay. So it's not text, not numeric, not a sequence.
Object none type. Exactly. It sits in its own category representing that specific concept of absence.
Got it. Okay, let's maybe pull the key points together again. A quick recap.
Sounds good. So first, bool none gives you false. It's falsy.
Right.
But crucially, none is false results in false. They are not the same object.
Different objects. Got it. Okay.
Then we saw its practical uses as the default value for optional function parameters, making functions flexible, like the key none and sorted. And as the implicit return value from functions that don't explicitly return something else, it signals no specific result.
Right, like print.
Understanding these points really helps write clearer, more predictable Python code and avoid some common bugs.
This has been really helpful. It seems simple, none, but these distinctions, especially with false and knowing when to use that's super important.
It really is. Those details matter a lot in practice.
So, for everyone listening, now that you've got, hopefully, a better handle on none.
Yeah, maybe think about how you could use this. How might you use none as a default in your own functions to make them more adaptable?
Or how could you use myvar? None to clearly show a variable is waiting for data.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And really reflect on that difference between none and other falsy things like zero or empty strings. How could getting that distinction wrong potentially mess up the logic in your programs?
That's a great point. It seems basic, but getting none right really impacts how clean and reliable your Python code ends up being. Something to definitely mull over.